Kindergarten Readiness, Incorporating DRDP-SR into Classrooms, a webinar presented by Children Now.
Hi, good morning. I'm Ted Lempert, President of Children Now, and just want to thank you all for joining the webinar this morning. We're very excited and have some great speakers, two great leaders from the Department of Education and two great district county office leaders that are going to be speaking to us today. Kindergarten Readiness, Incorporating DRDP-SR into Classrooms. The reason Children Now is so excited about hosting this webinar and discussing with us all today is that a number of years ago, thanks to the Morgan Family Foundation and the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, the Kindergarten Readiness tool was being used in districts throughout San Mateo and Santa Clara County, and really a very, very helpful tool to kindergarten teachers as students entered their classrooms, and also the results of those that tool was aggregated up, so it gave a really strong snapshot of kids throughout those two counties and how prepared they were or weren't entering kindergarten. And so we have been working as an organization with a number of you on the phone, and especially kudos to Superintendent Torlakson and his team for really helping to push this issue out statewide and highlighting the use of the DRDP-SRs and encouraging districts to use that. So we're very interested with all of you to learn more about how the tool is being used in districts throughout the state already, how that use can be expanded, and really with the long-term goal of all kindergarten teachers in the state having the tool that they can use to really better assess their students as they enter kindergarten and help them better educate those kindergarten kids, and also having this tool being used as a great way to aggregate up information throughout districts and throughout the state on the preparation for our kids as they enter kindergarten. So with no further ado, as I mentioned, we have four great speakers today, and then we will be taking questions afterwards. The first, Lupita Cortez Alcala, Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction in the Instruction and Learning Support Branch at the California Department of Education. And again, just as I turn it over to Lupita, just thanks so much to the department for their great leadership on kindergarten readiness and really expanding the use of this tool.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Ted. On behalf of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson, we want to welcome you and thank you, and of course say good morning. We're so glad that there's such a wide representation of schools, districts, and county offices of education interested in this topic. I'd like to also express my appreciation to Children Now for sponsoring this webinar and providing really the opportunity to understand the importance of kindergarten and of a kindergarten entry assessment and the California Department of Education's work in creating one. States are working to build kindergarten entry assessments to answer key questions about young children's readiness for school. You know, research and best practices have assisted California as we make decisions on the assessment of children, provide professional development on how to administer and use the results of assessments, and support timely and useful reporting of assessments data to teachers, administrators, families, school districts, and policymakers. Clearly, we want to be able to help students learn and be able to improve our practice. On August 23rd, the State Superintendent, Tom Torlakson, sent an email letter to all school superintendents throughout California announcing the availability of the department's kindergarten entry assessment, the desired results of developmental profile school readiness, or as we affectionately call it, the DRDP-SR assessment. So this assessment was developed by the Department of Education for use by teachers in transitional kindergarten and traditional kindergarten classrooms on a voluntary basis. It's really a resource for you all. One of the things that distinguishes this assessment tool over a readiness checklist is that it provides a valid and reliable measurement of an individual child's development across a developmental continuum in the key areas identified as the indicators of later school success. Administrators can support the use of this assessment because it is aligned with the Common Core state standards for kindergarten. The DRDP-SR and its companion data collection and analysis system called the DRDP DRDP Tech are available for California schools and districts for use free of charge. How often do we say that? I hope you find today's webinar useful and that you will consider the DRDP-SR as a viable choice for assessing the readiness of young learners entering transitional and traditional kindergarten. So again, I want to thank Children Now, and I'll allow the next speaker. Thank you again for inviting us to be a part of this and for allowing us to offer this for free as a resource to LEAs throughout the state of California.
Thank you very much, Lupita. So now we're really going to dive into the presentation, and Ann Campbell, the County Superintendent at San Mateo County, is going to talk about the work that she's done in her county to really promote the tool. So with that, I will turn it over to Ann.
Great. Thank you very, very much, and thanks again to Children Now for sponsoring this webinar today, and a warm shout out to all of you throughout California from San Mateo County, where we've got a gorgeous day, so I hope you do as well. I was thinking about the DRDP-SR from the perspective of the TK to 12 public education system, and I realized that if you had asked me 10 years ago why kindergarten readiness matters, I would have looked at you rather blankly and said, what are you talking about kindergarten readiness? Kids are ready for kindergarten when they've met the age requirement that's specified in the education code. And certainly over the last decade, I think we've learned a tremendous amount of how important kindergarten readiness is, rather than just simply meeting an age threshold, that there are a variety of skills that are vital to helping kids make that transition to TK or kindergarten and then on to the rest of their elementary school years. As Ted referenced, in San Mateo County, we've been partnering together with the Santa Clara County Office of Education and the Silicon Valley Community Foundation to really do a study of school readiness as children are entering TK and kindergarten, and then we're following them through longitudinally to see how they're doing. And what we've discovered in that work together is that school readiness is a key indicator of projecting a student's eventual academic success. And up until quite recently, we were using the school readiness assessment that assessed kids on 4 basic building blocks of readiness for kindergarten, including self-care and motor skills, self-regulation, social expression, and academic skills, especially in the realm of pre-literacy. And what we found was in San Mateo County, 57% of our entering kindergartners had all 4 of those skill areas in a good place, and they were ready to go as far as being ready for kindergarten. As we followed them through longitudinally, we also found that with that group of kids, when they took this 3rd grade CST test, that 77% of them ended up being proficient or advanced in math and 60% in language arts. Conversely, we had about 11% of kids over time who were not showing up as being ready in any of those 4 key areas, and as we followed them through longitudinally in school, when they took the 3rd grade CST, only 13% of them were proficient or advanced. What we also found from that work was that there are 2 areas that were absolutely vital to later success in school. If you had strong skills in the academic sector and in the self-regulation area, those were actually very significant predictors of later academic success, and those kids were 3 times more likely to be proficient or advanced on the CST than their peers. So obviously what we've discovered is that school kindergarten readiness really matters for later success in school. This work over time in 2012 morphed into, rather than using the school readiness assessment that we've been using the DRDP-SR, which of course rates kids across 5 domains of school readiness, academic skills being part of that. It includes mathematics, but also very importantly social and emotional skills as well. So we're getting a picture of the whole child. When we first used the DRDP-SR in 2012 with kindergarten teachers throughout our 2 counties, we discovered something really interesting, and it had to do with the perceptions of kindergarten teachers as they were receiving their incoming kindergartners in the fall. And actually, when the DRDP-SR data came back, between 74 and 81% of students were actually at or above where their teachers expected them to be, and 19 to 26% of the kids fell below where their teachers expected them to be. So that statistic right there, I think, really shows how important an instrument like the DRDP is to giving us vital information about where our kids are that teachers can then use to adjust their instruction depending on what a child's particular needs are. We've certainly learned over time that the earlier we can intervene with kids and get their skills up to where they need to be, the better it is, much better than remediating later on. Also, in addition to helping remediate early on and through intervention, we also have the chance with the data that comes from the DRDP-SR of if we've got kids who are those academic all-stars as they're coming into kindergarten, we can really adjust the curriculum to move them forward much more quickly on their academics as well. One thing that I think we've really learned from the DRDP work that we've done over the last couple of years is how powerful as an instrument it is, because it gives us information on the students' academic preparation, but it also gives us a much more holistic view of who they are as individuals with their social and emotional skills. As we're entering the era of the Common Core content standards, I think that the more data and the earlier we can get it on children, it's so critical, because as we think about the Common Core being a continuum of skills that develop over time, we have a good sense through the DRDP of where students are and how we can move them forward. So it's a really great instrument for gathering that data. I also think with the Common Core, it's so much more than academics. It's certainly important as far as academics is concerned, but there's so many other skills, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creative thinking, that the DRDP gives us good insight into those other skills that kids need to have to be successful as well as they start their TK or K-12 educational experience. I'd also say the other wonderful thing about the DRDP that we're discovering here in San Mateo County is traditionally there's been a canyon between the world of preschool educators and the TK to third grade elementary teachers. The DRDP provides a great opportunity for facilitating increased communication between those two worlds that have previously been separated from one another. And in San Mateo County, we talk a lot about a warm handoff of kids as they're moving from preschool into TK or kindergarten. And that warm handoff now can consist of our preschool teachers talking with our kindergarten and early elementary teachers about what they know about individual students, but also, just as importantly, when we think about the Common Core, they can share the work that they've done with the preschool foundations, which then goes very nicely to be integrated in with the Common Core as kids enter TK or kindergarten. So that's great for kids because it results in there being a much more integrated approach to their preschool and early elementary years as well. We also say in San Mateo County, and I know in other places in California, that we talk about ready children, ready families, ready schools, ready communities. And I think that DRDP does a great job of helping us know that kids are ready and helping our schools be ready to receive those ready children, which is great as well. And then just one last thought about how we've used the DRDP data here in San Mateo County. At the school site level, we have a great opportunity for teachers, rather than each individual teacher sort of kind of getting a sense of where their kids are. They now get so much more information because of the continuity and the coordination of working together with the DRDP. And it also provides a great professional development opportunity for teachers as well, and they do a lot of sharing with their colleagues. At the district level, what we have found is that rather than each individual elementary school doing its own kindergarten assessment, everybody's using a common language, and it has standardized practice across schools, and it gives schools a chance to begin to track student progress as they move through kindergarten and into the early elementary years. And they can get a sense of, are there trends that they're starting to see as far as readiness levels or interventions that they're trying, so that they can then begin to learn from that data. And then finally, in concluding here in San Mateo County, at the county level, we've used the data that we've gotten from our work with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation and with the Santa Clara County Office of Education to really look at the importance of quality preschool for our 3- and 4-year-olds. And we've recently launched an initiative that we're calling the Big Lift, which is designed to get kids into quality preschool for 2 years. We've learned through various local research here that 2-year dosage of quality preschool is critical for school readiness and for kids being ready for kindergarten. And so we're in the midst of launching that so that we will have all of our 3- and 4-year-olds here enrolled in quality preschool programs so that as they enter the doors of TK or kindergarten, they truly are school ready. And we're very, very excited about that. We've been very encouraging to our districts to use the DRDP-SR. They've gained a wealth of information from doing it, and we really believe that the data that it provides us helps us to propel our entering kindergartners on a trajectory of academic success as they move through school. So we're good proponents of the DRDP, and we appreciate the chance to be here today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Anne. It was good to hear about your experiences in San Mateo County. And so with that, I will turn it over to Cecelia Fisher-Dahms, who's at the Department of Education and has been working on this, the DRDP-SR for many years and is one of the experts on it. Cecelia?
Thank you, Deborah. So I'm actually going to go through a number of the basics about the desired results, developmental profile, SR, and as Lupita had said, yes, we affectionately describe it as the DRDP-SR, and that begins to roll off your tongue after a while. So just to give you an overview, when we say school readiness, we developed the instrument as a kindergarten entry assessment that would be done at the beginning of the school year. I actually experienced, even from districts in San Mateo and across the state, have indicated that some are actually interested in using it for both pre and post throughout kindergarten. It has 30 measures, which we'll talk about, and in 5 key domains that were identified by the National Goals Panel, and also with empirical literature that says that these key domains are really the most reflective of later school success. Now, in terms of the development, a number of you might realize that the department had been engaged with the development of the desired results developmental profile for infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and we actually have an after-school one for school-age children. And in discussions, we then embarked on the school readiness assessment because there were questions about what would really be reflective of school readiness. And rather than use the preschool instrument, it would be really more developmentally appropriate to have that be done by kindergarten teachers themselves. So the department, which is in the next slide, the department in conjunction with UC Berkeley Evaluation and Assessment Research Center and our colleagues at West Ed Center for the Study of Child and Family for Children and Families, who were involved in our DRDP work, also then engaged in several rounds of testing, field testing, with a wide swatch of transitional kindergarten and kindergarten students. We had an earlier round, and then based on that field study, created what is now the 2015. We are currently engaged with the Illinois Board of Education on expanding to a more comprehensive set, which I'll talk about in a moment, using their Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant. So it has been actually very interesting to have this cross-country development on this product. So when we look about what in fact is the DRDP-SR, we want to identify it as an observation-based assessment tool rather than a test, a checklist, any of those kinds of things. It really hinges on teachers' field experience with their children over the day-to-day course of interacting with them. It is reliable and valid. So I know that a number of districts use their own developed assessments or checklists, but this really draws on the research about children's development and has been studied and tested so to ensure that its reliability and validity. So I think that adds a measure of assurance in the use of this tool. And as I said, it really draws upon teachers day-to-day observing, documenting, reflecting on their children's progress. So it's a more natural assessment rather than a performance-based kind of assessment. So just to provide you that perspective. Then what are the basics about it? So it's an individual child observation-based assessment. As I said, based on the developmental research and theory. It is the most current information, and we'll see that it is fully aligned because we actually engaged some of those same researchers that were used to develop the National Common Core standards. So in fact, we did rely on Doug Clements, on Chris Lonergan and Ann Cunningham, and Ross Thompson here in California. So a number of those key researchers were actually involved in it. The other thing that I think sets it apart is that we're talking about children's knowledge and skills across a developmental sequence. So what you can observe and see that children are doing. So rather than saying, oh, they were ready or were not ready, you really know how close to readiness they were or how much they have exceeded that. So it really helps in terms of curriculum planning. As I said, your ongoing day-to-day work, and our general recommendation is that it's done within the first 60 days of the start of the school year, so that it allows the teacher to have some time to really know it and understand her children, and then also be able to use that to inform curriculum planning. And then I've got you the URL for where to find it. Now, the purpose to the DRDP is to really serve as a framework for documenting where children are across that developmental continuum, so that you can plan for those children who need more precursor kinds of skills to support that. It really allows you to individualize your instruction. And also the information can be rolled up to provide information for administrators. What are those kinds of professional development that we might have to support those classroom teachers with the children's development? What do I need to inform parents about their children's progress? How can we help to support them with what are those skills that they can also support in that? And then certainly the information does help you to measure whether you are actually having an impact on children's growth and development, to hopefully improve those child outcomes. Now I want to talk about the specifics that are in those domains, which are those learning areas. Now, many of you are certainly familiar with the language and literacy and with mathematics, and there are a number of tools that are out there for assessing kindergarten entry. What this instrument brings is it does also include social and emotional development and self-regulation, which is often described as approaches to learning, and also and this is not in competition with the CELT, but it also does English language development across a developmental continuum of English language acquisition. So I think that all of these things actually do inform you. Now remember, I had talked earlier about our work in conjunction with Illinois, who, by the way, does have the desired results developmental profile school readiness is actually a required, is mandated for kindergarten use. Kind of interesting that California's tool is voluntary here, but it's mandatory in Illinois. And they are working on additional domains, which includes a Spanish language development, language and literacy development, which is kind of an interesting one, the physical development and health, history, social science, and visual and performing arts. And so if you look at those, and also science, it's there in the italics above there. So it actually, the 2015 that we're working on will actually cover all of the domains that we are looking at. And so we might look at how we will frame it with which ones are those, if you need to do a brief and essential one, which is more like the 12, and which one will be the fully expanded one, which we'll have available in 15. And I don't need to talk anymore about that whole developmental process. Now, one of the things that is very significant about this instrument is that, in fact, it is fully aligned with the Kindergarten Common Core, the National Goals Panel domain, and our California Preschool Learning Foundations. So that, as Ann was mentioning earlier, this instrument can actually speak to what we are expecting our young kindergartners to know. It is fully aligned with what those expectations are in early care and education, with the preschool foundation, and so that you can feel confident about using this instrument because it actually speaks to what our expectations are for our transitional kindergarten and kindergarten students. And I'll show you information about how you can actually show development over time with the kinds of reports that we have. And as Ann mentioned, just without even any prompting, I appreciate this, that it actually provides that way to have a communication between your preschool teachers and your kindergarten teachers so that you have this cross-exchange of information. This slide shows you those domains that we're talking about: the English language development, social emotional, self-regulation, language and literacy, and mathematics, and then you can go through and see what those 30 measures are, which I'm not going to describe any more so, but that gives you the array of that. One of the things I do like to point out in terms of what many kindergarten teachers aren't used to thinking about is issues about curiosity, persistence, self-regulation, all of these kinds of things that when they then begin to see what that developmental trajectory is, that can actually inform their planning and their practice. I'm just going to do a few slides on what a measure page actually looks like. So this is one that's in the social emotional development that will show you the domain, what we're talking about, the measure. There's actually a definition. Then you can see that there are 5 developmental areas for which a teacher is making a decision about, and we also provide exemplars of what that might look like in a typical classroom so that it helps with that informing practice. And then the next slide actually shows you that really what we're asking you, the classroom teacher, to do is you're really making one decision per page. So it's actually 30 decisions on developmental progress. So it's actually quite simple. Then I'm moving to, so that was that slide, that's one decision, and I'm moving to the next slide. I want to take a little time to talk about what are the resources that you have and classroom teachers have to use, which is our data system, which is through the DRDP Tech. So that the slide on that shows you that when you enter that page, it has so this is showing the developmental profile, and will help you to get class reports, assessments, group reports, child assessments, and the resources. So that will be available to you. We're going to go into the next one. The array of reports that are available to you are per child, so very discreetly for a classroom, for subgroups within that, say for English language learners. It can roll up to that site, that school. It can roll up to the district. It can roll up to the county level. So multiple levels of principals, superintendents that can be informed by these. And I'm now going to talk about what some of these tools or these reports look like. So this shows you that you have both. You can select child reports and individual child, a summary and a scale report, and group reports on those same kinds of things. So it allows you to make some of those choices. The next slide I'll show you looks at, this is one of the ones that is sort of my favorite. So if a classroom teacher wanted to know how a child was doing on a specific domain, this one shows English language development, social emotional development, and self-regulation. And it shows so if you look at that black line and then the gray on either side, sort of like a butterfly kind of thing, it shows where the child is along that developmental continuum, and with sort of a plus or minus factor, because remember, we're engaged with UC Berkeley, so they're very precise on the psychometrics behind this. The other thing I want you to notice is that the gradation in colors are not all equal bars, because children's progression in some of these developmental continuums are not equal steps, and so this actually, the psychometrics behind that actually reflect what that would be reflective of. So in this example, you'll see that they're performing very well in terms of social emotional development and self-regulation, and their English language development is coming along, but it's not at that higher level. But it gives you a way to analyze how children are performing. And I think this is really very helpful for classroom teachers, as well as to having that discussion with their parents about children's performance. The next slide actually shows you that if you were using this system either with preschool and then with kindergarten, you could show children's development over time. And in this case, this was being used in the fall and then in the spring to show, in terms of mathematics, how the child's progression went from building competencies, am I correct? To applying competencies. So really showed a progression over that school year, which I think, again, would be very helpful for having those conversations with parents. The next slide shows you that, so those two that I mentioned earlier, and then on the left-hand side shows your whole class, and this can be, this is the group, and it would show you the percentage, how many are at this level, that level, and so on, so you can get a perspective of how to plan. Anyway, there's an array of tools. I'm just going to go through those, so that's sort of the quick look of what's available to you. The other thing that, compared to, say, your third grade reading scores, is once you put the data in, these reports are available to you right there. There is no additional processing. You don't have to wait for it to go to somebody and come back. You could do this if even along the year you wanted to really check something. You can do this and get feedback immediately. When you talk about data-driven decisions, this is really hands-on. You can do it, and I think, as Ann was saying, having the data accessible to you for making decisions is really a strong positive aspect to this. Okay, then I want to talk to you quickly about what professional development is there to support you and your classroom teachers. We have created 6 online modules, 6 self-paced ones. Teachers can do this at home on their own. It can be a new person who has come in during the year, or if someone wants to do a self-refresher. So these are available anytime online. There are DRDP tech trainings that allow you to look, and there's a free webinar, and we can also do in-person training that can be available. The DRDP online training, to give you more detail about it, it can, as I say, allow you to do more in-depth training. The teacher will really understand what we mean about, we would call it portfolio development, how to observe, how to document, how to reflect on what you've collected and know about those children. It allows you a way to think about the information that you've gathered and how that would inform the individualization of your curriculum, as well as how to move the class towards your intended learning outcomes, and as well as how to help best share that information with parents. So all of that is presented on those online coursework. And then lastly, I want to talk about, this is really, this is a different kind of big lift than Ann's, is really to move to a child observational assessment is a new process for many kindergarten teachers that might not have been part of their training in terms of child assessment. And so we've actually explored a number of ways to sort of ease on into the process. One might be the process that you might just take a small percentage of your students the first year, so that teacher might look at who are those children just even instinctively I come in and who I really might want to really understand their readiness. So just take a small group, and the next year jump it up to half of the class, and then the following year you really then become familiar with the instrument. You begin to recognize the what I'm looking for, what I want to measure, and the process actually becomes more it becomes easier as you begin to know the tool, know what it's measuring. My second strategy is that you have teachers who, in most schools, really you'll have those early adopters, those eager beavers who are ready to try something that's new. Have those new teachers do it, become really comfortable, familiar with it, and then have them work as mentors for their peers, so that they have the support of one another in that process. There might be other strategies, but of course you could always jump in with both feet, and everybody do that. But I wanted to present some strategies that would really work to a way to ease on into the adoption of a real change in practice for many teachers. So that's what I would like to present to you, and hope that you'll consider that, and I'll be here to address any other questions that might come up through this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cecelia. Now I'm going to turn it over to Janice Thompson, who's the Early Learning Coordinator at West Contra Costa Unified, and she's going to share her on-the-ground experiences with the tool. Janice?
Hi, good morning, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be on board with you all to talk about the DRDP. This is our third year of implementing transitional kindergarten, and next year in the fall will be our fourth year, and we're moving into, we've gone from one teacher to the fall we'll have 18 classrooms in our TK program. The first, I'm just going to talk with you about what is needed for implementation. Make sure that you train your administrators on the DRDP process. Make sure they understand the DRDP tech. We are still working on that with our administrators. We are working to the point that we've set up some more training sessions for them in the fall. And make sure there's leadership and buy-in to DRDP tech, because that's very important in how it is taken from everyone, and how the message would be sent that this is an important observational tool to be used to help our students. Technical support and resources. We've used technical support from West Ed, and we've used technical support from our County Office of Education. And in the fall, and not in the fall, in August, we have a very intensive training component for DRDP to make sure that everyone's on board and utilizes the tool correctly. The key steps for engaging teachers. Our TK teachers they're some of the best teachers around. We're really proud of them. Our students have made a lot of growth. It is evident through our DRDP results for SR. We use DRDP in our preschool program, so it's all linked together. And teachers are talking together in groups about DRDPs, and they're looking at effective strategies on how to do better with their DRDPs. Talking about ways to set it up so that it's an ongoing assessment. It's not something that you do at the last minute. It's an observational tool. And changing that mindset, because the moment someone hears the word assessment or observations or writing it down, they have a tendency to think that, okay, I have to do this between this particular window as if you were taking an actual test. Some of the lessons learned from us: take it slow, invite others to the party, work with the staff, and make sure that everyone is totally engaged in all the things that we do, and build an understanding. I skipped one piece about deciding to utilize the tool. We decided to utilize the tool because we currently have a preschool program that uses DRDP-PS. So now we have DRDP-SR, and we have our district kinder benchmarks. So making sure all of these things are aligned. And it is important, and we're working on a stronger alignment system. And what's really fabulous about the whole system, it allows for an opportunity to build relationships and build communications with parents and within your school community about how children are growing and flowing. So there are a lot of benefits here, and so I'm hoping that you'll be able to use it and have some of the great discoveries and the successes that we have had.
We're about to wrap up, but we wanted to make sure that you saw that there are many resources available for folks that are interested in engaging this. So we've got some on the presentation, and we will be sending out copies of the presentation soon, so you'll have this information in your email so that you can look at it and review some of the materials that might be available that can help you with this. And so with that, I think we have some time for questions of our presenters. So Ted, do you have some questions?
Sure. Thanks, Debra, and I'll MC the questions, and we have some good ones. But first, just wanted to thank Lupita and Cecelia and Janice again. And that mystery voice you hear is Debra Brown, our Associate Director of Education at Children Now. So thank you, Debra, for all your leadership on this. And one other thank you I forgot to say at the beginning. I wanted to thank West Ed and UC Bear for all their help with this webinar. So we do have a number of questions, and I think what I'll do is if there's a specific person, I'll say. Otherwise, any of the five of you, and I'm including Debra in that, can just jump in. So the first question we got was, are you aware of any other states besides Illinois using DRDP-SR? Does anyone have a quick response to that one?
I'm not. We have, okay, on the national scene, especially with Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge, there, one of the elements is connecting or demonstrating positive child outcomes with the kindergarten entry assessment. And so a number of states are exploring the use of the DRDP-SR, but the only one that we're actually engaged in work is with Illinois. So that's the only one I'm aware of.
Okay, great. The next question, will we be able to find out which school districts are adopting DRDP-SR?
Oh, I don't know how that would be an interesting one. Maybe we could do that through Children Now, because I'm not sure what forum we would use within the department for having that made available to you. But certainly, we know that from who is logged on to DRDP Tech. So I can get that. We'll have to have a conversation with Debra and Ted with how to make that most available to you.
Great, thanks, Cecelia. And while you actually have the mic, I have another question. I know I had mentioned the idea of aggregating results when we teed up the webinar. So this question is, to what degree can the results be aggregated across classrooms, schools, districts, etc.?
Okay, that's a good one. Certainly, remember I said the roll-up within a county. You could go from the school to the district to the, you can roll it all the way up. So that's within. You would look at getting permissions, which we could work on through the DRDP Tech. So that, say, if you wanted the County Office of Ed to be able to have the information from all of the districts coming into them. We've sort of created what we call super users, so we could work on that, but of course we'd have to get the permissions from each of those districts for it to roll up, say, to the County Office of Ed. So if you would like us to help facilitate that, we could certainly work on doing that. And if we're talking about broader than that, like a state roll-up and so on, we have not been engaged in that. There are a number of, just in the statistical process, where we would have a significant body of uptake across the state, so that we would actually be speaking to, say, a state aggregate that you could do for, say, comparison data, and we don't have that, which I could understand you might want to do for evaluative purposes, but we don't have a volume to meet that statistical threshold yet. If that's not what you were intending, if the person who had that question, you can certainly ask me a follow-up on that. But
okay, great. The next question, and a couple of you might want to jump in on this one, two similar questions, so I'll sort of condense them. Our preschool Head Start classrooms already use the DRDP. Wouldn't it be better to just work on getting that information to our TK and kindergarten teachers as students start school, rather than those teachers doing a whole new assessment? So do one or two of you want to respond to that one?
Well, this is Janice again. We utilize the DRDP-PS in our preschool program, and we also use the SR in our TK program. But the TK is a little more deeper than the PS, so it allows for teachers to actually see what's expected in transitional kindergarten and vice versa. And we can have great discussions around how does this look in kinder versus how does it look in preschool, and what are the activities and the different things we need to do with our children to make sure that they are on the way of building and learning that particular standard or that particular foundation, or that to demonstrate knowledge of that measure. So that's very important, and looking at authentic student work, it really offers an enriching conversation time for teachers.
Yeah, I would also chime in. This is Ann. That I think kids are developing so quickly when they're in this age bracket that where they may be in the spring may be very, very different than where they are in the fall. And so I think to do the DRDP-SR once they're in TK or in kindergarten really gives you the most accurate picture of where they are at that point in time.
And I'll just concur, that's actually why we were looking at that, so that really the development of what occurs through that summertime, and then the other element is really to have it help to inform curriculum planning. And if you were basing that off of information from the spring, it's informative, but not as much as trying to synthesize that for yourself for the planning for that new school year.
Great, thank you. The next question, can you provide specific schools in California that are using the tool so we can contact them to ask more questions about implementation and use for planning instruction? So Cecelia, Debra, maybe this is something we could work together to help provide as follow-up to the webinar, or other thoughts on that question?
Yes, I really like that. That was the earlier question, was who is using that, and so we can see whether we need to have something either on the SR so that it can be anyone, or if we want to do that through the Children Now. But if there's any way that we can help to support and encourage that, so it's sort of taking my implementation one to a higher level to look at I really appreciate that, the idea of mentoring other districts. So I certainly would want to encourage that. That's a great idea.
This is Debra. I agree too. That's a great idea, and so we'll work with.
This concludes our webinar on Kindergarten Readiness, incorporating DRDP-SR into classrooms. Thank you for your participation.